The Thunder became the first NBA team to fire a coach this year, but it wasn't alone for long. From the Dodge Sports Desk, I'm Mike Sherman, and this is the NBA and OKC with Mike Baldwin. Mike, the Thunder made a coaching change 13 games into the NBA season. Then on Monday, a couple days later, the Washington Wizards did it in 11 games. Both of these franchises are struggling. Both of them had one win at the time. From a mathematical perspective, this is like the Kansas City Royals firing their manager about a month.
You went there.
I went there.
Okay.
About a month into the season. You're a Royals guy. But tell us, what do these moves really sort of explain to us and tell us about these two franchises? And to start with the Thunder first.
Well, the Thunder's for obvious reason. The one thing they've been saying all along is we will play hard. We don't know how many games we'll win, but we'll give you a product that you can be proud of. Then all of a sudden you hear a little bit of booze or getting behind 20, 30 points all the time. People are leaving in the middle of the fourth quarter. I think this was one of those, they're worried PJ lost the team. The team wasn't playing hard. Whether it's PJ's fault or not, that can be debated, for months and through the rest of the season. But obviously with the new coach, Scott Brooks, they were playing a little harder in their first game. And I think the younger kids maybe relate to them pretty well, which Darnell wrote about Monday. So it's one of those, they did it more to make sure that the team plays hard the rest of the season. That's not going to be a playoff season. The Wizards, in contrast, have been to the playoffs the last 3 or 4 years. And can they salvage the season, still make the playoffs? Who knows? When the injured player comes back, that could be a huge impact, but there was such expectations to make the playoffs again. I think that was more of the typical what you see in the NFL and Major League Baseball and the NBA, and that is things are not going well. You can't fire all 12 players, fire the coach. So they were both moves made for the here and now for their fans. One was to say we're still shooting for the playoffs. The other one is we're going to give you better effort than you've seen so far.
Let's go back to the Thunder for a second. It's interesting after a firing takes place and you look back and start tracing back things that you hear. One of the questions last year, a 20-win season in Seattle, was a little bit about effort. I mean, there was some talk that the team wasn't playing especially hard. Last year, we didn't see that unless you had NBA League Pass. You didn't see that. So it wasn't a way to track that trend really into the regular season. The effort really became an issue early on in this season. You watched the game in New Orleans. How different was it in your mind?
Well, the biggest thing I think, and Darnell wrote about it if you want to go on News OK in the preview for today's game on Tuesday, was he changed Durant and Green, the two foundation players. Everybody said it's all about these guys getting better and your rookie, Russell Westbrook, trying to find out what he can do the rest of the season. Well, he moves Durant down to the 3, Green down to the 4. It's been like 90-some games since these guys have played these positions. And so I think, one, his big impact on this team is to definitely create energy and tell the fans we're going to play hard. What you've been seeing is not permissible. We're going to change that. But the other thing is, he sees these guys 2-3 years down the road when they hope to be playoff teams playing the position he's moved them to. If that proves to be the case 3 or 4 months from now, everybody will say, boy, what a genius move. Maybe they'll keep him on after this 4-month audition. If not, you may have to move him back to where PJ had him. It's one of those interesting moves just to see how it affects your two players that you're building a franchise around.
Okay, and with the Wizards, their move, they got rid of Eddie Jordan, who had taken the team to the playoffs, who had had more success really than a Wizard coach has had or a franchise coach has had for lots of years. But he's without Gilbert Arenas and Brendan Haywood. Is it fair that he got fired so soon?
I don't think so, but like we said a while ago, a lot of times it's easier to fire the coach than to fire 12 players, and these guys are under contract. It affects your salary cap and all that. The coach does not. His salary doesn't affect the salary cap one iota. We see it all the time in pro sports. Sometimes it's to give you a little momentum. Sometimes maybe they've lost the team. We don't know the Wizards situation as well as we do our hometown team, the Thunder, and so maybe there is a little bit of that, but from what little I've been seeing in box scores, they were in most games. I mean, they weren't getting blown out like the Thunder was. They just lost some close games here and there, didn't make the key pass, the key shot, the key defensive stop. So I think it's a little unfair, but it's one of those things they're trying to rescue the season to a season ticket base that expects the playoffs.
Interesting, the Wizards will be coming here in March, and last weekend was 2 last straws, evidently, in Oklahoma City, the loss to the New Orleans Hornets, and just not very well.
The nation's capital and Oklahoma City's capital, yeah.
Yeah, but then in Washington, it was a loss to the New York Knicks that only had 7 players suited up. They gave up 122 points to the New York Knicks team that only had 7 guys in uniform. That was the last straw for them. Now let's talk about the timing. You're watching the NBA and OKC with Mike Baldwin. Mike, let's talk about the timing of the move. Sam Smith, formerly Chicago Tribune, now with Bulls.com, one of the most respected NBA writers there is really, he really takes Oklahoma City to task a little bit in saying that they violated one of the unwritten rules of coaching changes in that they brought the new coach, Scott Brooks, in a time for immediately face an unfavorable schedule rather than a favorable schedule. Here's what he was talking about. Saturday night in New Orleans, Tuesday night at home against Phoenix, and then Wednesday at Cleveland. 3 of the tougher teams in the league. What's your take on that?
Well, I disagree with that, and I also disagree with what Barry Tremmel wrote, that you should use your timing. You got Bedlam football, you have Texas Tech OU football. You should make it to where you can make a big PR splash. In a perfect world, yeah, but you basically do fix your team. Don't worry about everybody outside your world. The one advantage I see to playing those 3 good teams is, will they probably lose all 3 of those games? Probably, but then December, we've been writing about it, is the easiest month of the year. There's 15 games in there, and a lot of those are winnable. It's teams like you, the Memphises, the Minnesotas, the Golden States, the Torontos, just go down the list. And so I think this 3-game stretch and 2 days off gives him a chance to work with this team, move these guys around a little bit, maybe carry a little momentum. Even if you don't win any of these 3 games, I think there's a lot of winnable games coming up. What if you waited and do it right after that and the losing streak gets longer, their daubers are really down, PJ could be a mess? I think it's a blessing in disguise. I see his point of view, but I disagree with it.
Okay, Mike, next question. There have been a lot of names floated out when the coaching change was made. And, you know, there wasn't any time for speculation. The interim coach was named, and he's through the end of the season, yet you still heard him. And I emphasize floated. I want to play a little word association with you. I'm going to say the name of a coach, and you tell me really about the viability of this coach as a candidate, specifically in Oklahoma City. In April in Oklahoma City.
Right.
Avery Johnson.
I think if Scott Brooks doesn't pass the test, he's number 1 on the list.
Why?
They have a relationship from their Spurs days. They know each other well, Sam Presti and Avery Johnson. He's got a track record. The only key would be, does Avery want to take over a rebuilding project? We don't know how much interest Avery would have, but I think the Thunder would have a lot of interest in Avery if, remember, Brooks doesn't pass the test.
Jeff Van Gundy.
It's one of those, I don't know his relationship with Presti really well, but he's one of those, he's one of the hotter coaches on the market, so he definitely has to be somebody that you'd have to consider.
Coached in the NBA Finals with the Knicks. Let's go with, how about
you got Flip Saunders?
How about Flip Saunders?
He's got a little Tulsa background, coached in the CBA, took the Minnesota Timberwolves, then of course the Pistons took them to the finals year after year. They said, well, you can't quite get over it. I like Flip a lot. I don't know if he has any relationship with Sam Presti at all, but I like Flip. I mean, as we can tell, there's some good choices out there if, once again, Brooks doesn't pass his audition.
And I'm going to bring back a little bit of the Oklahoma City professional basketball history for you. Right when you were covering the Oklahoma City Cavalry of the CBA, before that, when the franchise just started, this would be the second time that Flip Saunders is interviewed for a head coaching job in Oklahoma City, because he interviewed for the Cavalry job way back when he was a CBA coach, and they picked your man,
Henry Bibby.
Henry Bibby over Flip Saunders.
Henry Bibby, by the way, has been hanging out with the Charlotte Bobcats and Larry Brown to get his name back out there, but it hadn't worked so far.
Hope you get to meet up with Henry, too. Hey, by the way, let's go to one more question on this topic of the coaching change. Scott Brooks. We've written some about him. We're going to write a lot more about him. But is there any chance that Scott Brooks, the new coach of the Thunder on the interim basis, could have been the guy this franchise wanted all along back in 2007 when they were looking for a coach?
I think Carlisle and Brooks were definitely on the radar, but as we've discussed off camera, I think you don't want too much newness as far as a new coach, a new GM, new this and that. I think that was one of the issues involved. Go with the safer pick, a veteran, PJ Carlesimo, who knew the Spurs model that Presti wanted to model his franchise after, and he had coached in the NBA before with 2 other franchises. So yeah, I think that was the safe pick, and who knows how much even a Clay Bennett gets involved in some of these decisions. He never speaks publicly. It's all conjecture. You don't know, but I think all along Presti liked Rick Carlisle and Mr. Brooks. He chose PJ. PJ had his first shot at it. Now it's Brooks' shot. And as you mentioned, there's another long list if Brooks doesn't pass the test.
The Scott Brooks era began Saturday night in New Orleans. It continues Tuesday at the Ford Center against the Phoenix Suns. Mike, thanks for all the information. Listen, that's all for the NBA and OKC, but the conversation about all things Thunder and the NBA rages on at Oklahoma City's newest fan website, thundermadness.com, and you can keep up on all the news and analysis of Oklahoma City's first NBA season to call its own every day at newsok.com and in the new look Oklahoman.